Get in the know, non-stop Vikings talk. It's Purple Daily on Score North and ScoreNorth.com.
Vikings Vent Line right here on Purple Daily. What's going on, everyone? Declan Goff here to take you another edition through Vikings Vent Line with my guys Ryan and Steven here in just a little bit. We're going to talk a little bit of draft. We're going to talk some Kirk Cousins because obviously talk a little offseason moves as well. Very excited to get their opinions and thoughts so far on the Vikings offseason. Vikings Vent Line, of course, airs every Sunday on the Purple Daily YouTube channel. And if you'd like to get in on a future episode of Vikings Vent Line, shoot me a note. It's vikingsventline@gmail.com. I do see the invites that come in every week. I got a little bit of a process. I process through all of them and whatnot. So if you've been a repeat person and I haven't gotten back to you, just keep sending me a link every once in a while. I'll certainly get to you and get you on this show every Sunday right here on Purple Daily. I love hearing from Vikings fans. Of course, we do this during the regular season too, right after games with Mackie, Judd, and myself. So really excited to talk to Ryan and Steven here in just a little bit. But thanks for everyone for making Vikings Vent Line happen. This is your show. It's a safe space. Whether you're pro-Kirk, anti-Kirk, pro-Kevin O'Connell, anti-Kevin O'Connell, for whatever reason, I don't know why you'd be the latter. But hit me up. It's vikingsventline@gmail.com. And of course, we're sponsored by our friends at Dennis Kirk and DennisKirk.com. Motorcycle parts and accessories. Getting closer and closer to riding season here. Whether you're in the Twin Cities or whether you're wherever you are across the country, you can go to DennisKirk.com to pick up some of those motorcycle parts, accessories, however you're riding. Make sure it's from our friends at Dennis Kirk. All right, let's get our guys in here. Let's get Ryan in here. Let's get my guy Steven in here. Steven told me he's in Jersey. Ryan, where are you calling from?
Yeah, so I'm in Phoenix, Arizona.
Okay, nice. What brought you to being a Vikings fan?
Kind of random. So I grew up in Washington. Didn't have any family members that were Vikings fans, but one of my first video games I got on Xbox was NFL 2K2. Randy Moss was on the cover, and I just started playing with the Vikings, fell in love with Randy Moss, and actually I was a huge fan of Michael Bennett back in the day too, although his run didn't last super long. But ever since then, I've been a loyal Vikings fan.
I love it. And Steven, you're in Jersey, so you're holding it down over there. Are there like Vikings watch bars and parties? Like, how do you kind of stay afloat with the purple and watching Vikings games all the way over there?
You know what? It's so there, to answer your question, no, there's not, at least around me. But like, given the internet now, we have, you have your text chains and your WhatsApp, chats where you have, you can't pause a game without getting, everybody around here is a Jets fan. So people like to break my chops when something happens. So you got to watch live and, thank God for the NFL ticket. So
apologies that now Aaron Rodgers is now on your side, sharing the same, zip codes, if you will, with you. So I do apologize with that. You have to deal with that now that he's in your state. Too bad, man. That's rough
I'm
for you.
Sorry.
It's all right. You know what? All my Jets fans friends, I mean, they have no idea what they're getting here, but he's should be good.
I love it. Fellas, we're about a week now past the NFL draft. So the draft's in the books. We've had a kind of a week or so to process it and think on it a little bit. So I want to talk some draft with you guys here to start off. Ryan, I'm going to start with you. Tell me this. What did you love about the Vikings draft class? Was there a pick? Was there a situation? What did you really like about the Vikings draft class this year?
Yeah, I just think overall, I feel like we addressed what we needed to address. I feel like getting a wide receiver was a smart choice. Part of me, I was interested in a couple of the cornerbacks like Deonte Banks or Brian Branch. But I understand just because it was a deep corner class, obviously the front office has way more research that they do than I do myself. So I thought it was smart. And then getting a lot of young secondary help. It kind of seems like we're just stockpiling young, talented, cornerbacks, safeties, and we're just going to let them play it out and let the cream kind of rise to the top. So I think based on like our secondary status that we have now, I think they did a smart move of kind of loading up on that aspect. And then just hearing about Jaren Hall before the draft, looking into him and watching his film, I'm excited. I don't know what he's going to be, but it's always good to see a guy that looks good on film, a mobile quarterback, someone that looks like they have potential. So I thought overall, I think we addressed the needs that we had and made the most of the limited picks that we had too. So, personally, I like the draft. I don't think I could have been much happier.
I love it. Yeah, I mean, the Jaron Hall pick's the most interesting part, I think, after Jordan Addison, just because it's a quarterback and it's one of the more fun things to talk about. To your point, Addison kind of makes this offense a little bit more deeper. He was being mocked to the Vikings a lot in the pre-back mock draft process. The Vikings obviously interviewed him too, so not a huge shocker to see him go to the Vikings at pick 23. Steven, what do you think, man? What do you really like about this year's draft class?
You know what? I thought it was like a barbell. I liked Addison up front. I like the UDFAs. I like McBride in the back end. It seems to me, I don't know, like Kwesi gets a little cute with some of these, picks in the middle. I mean, I understand he's got his own algorithm that he likes to use, to figure out what the value of these picks are. But, and by the way, I don't really know, but, just based on like some of the, kind of the pre-draft rankings of some of these players, I think he stretched in the middle of the draft. Love Addison. I like what they did with the UDFAs, and I like McBride, but I wasn't totally sold. I mean, we didn't address the middle of the kind of the guts of the team. So like the offensive line, certainly nose tackle maybe a little bit, but I was probably a little bit more lukewarm than Ryan.
Okay, and then so in the warts part or in the cons part of this draft. So you're kind of looking at a missed opportunity from filling out maybe something in the middle of your offensive line, defensive line. You probably would have liked to see the Vikings maybe address something in there. Is that where you wanted to see them kind of fill some of those holes there?
Well, I'm not sure on the top end of the draft you had to address guard or center
Right.
necessarily, but it just seems like we're razor thin there, and that there tends to be some injuries there. Who knows what's going on with Brian O'Neill? Brian O'Neill. I mean, it just feels like we could have probably done something better. And then addressing, certainly the run, our run defense was pretty soft last year. So I like what they did. It just seems to me like some of the players that they picked may have been a stretch where they picked them. But again, I know nothing, right? So I'm trusting in Kwesi. My fear is that he hasn't, he's very analytical, but sometimes scouting matters a lot, right? And player, kind of player development, player selection. And so while I'm going to have faith in him because he's our guy, based on last year's draft, you kind of have to take a look and say, I know that's kind of, we haven't really made a decision yet on how the last draft went, but just based on, it didn't feel like there was any picks in the middle of the draft that kind of got you excited, in my opinion.
I hear
Jaron
it.
Hall, again, like a 5th round pick, what are you going to expect out of him? But we'll see. I just thought like the trenches weren't addressed as much as they probably should have been.
Yeah, it's an area too that you can't sleep on. Like it's never a sexy pick to like do defensive tackle and guards and whatnot because they're not playmakers. They're not showing up on box scores and statistics, and they're not highlight reel guys, but you need them. And Vikings fans kind of have watched the run defense, at least to starting on that point, been run up and down the last few years. And the offensive line, I feel like, is in its best position in a long time, but at the same time, that's crawling out of the grave of where it's been before. So could it be better? Certainly. And yeah, I wouldn't have hated the idea of trying to find maybe another offensive lineman to your half just to give yourself a little bit of depth there, as I have a little bit of connection issues there in the middle of my rant. But at the same time, I hear what you're saying, that sometimes that offensive line could be certainly a little bit better. Ryan, was there any areas of the draft that you particularly didn't like?
Not particularly. I would say the one thing I didn't like was not getting Anthony Richardson. That's the only thing. But, I think based on the cards that we were dealt, I can understand the picks that they made. But yeah, going into the draft, of course, it's always exciting to get that young, talented QB. And of course, when Will Levis was on the board, myself and, watching your guys' live show, everyone was like, let's get Will Levis, just do it, get him. And I think it's easy to do that, but I think it was probably better for the team to just get what they believed was a solid wide receiver too, and not expend a bunch of draft picks to move up to get a player like Anthony Richardson. It's just like deep down, you kind of want to see that just to get like a fresh face at QB and get that potential. But I think when it comes to just building the team and more in the long run, it's probably good that we didn't trade up and get rid of a bunch of draft picks. But yeah, there's nothing in particular that I feel like they missed out on, in my opinion.
Absolutely. So let's go to that quarterback soccer here for just a bit. So yeah, they take Jaron Hall. Obviously, in front of him is Kirk Cousins, who's entering the last year of his contract. They kind of look like they're going to let it ride here. They've kicked some void years into the future. Kirk was at the podium this week, basically saying, "I have to go out there and earn it." So he doesn't seem too irked, at least on paper, by the decision. But what do you guys think? Do you think this is the wise move to kind of let it ride with Kirk? Would you have liked to see an extension with him? Ryan, I'll start with you here.
Yeah, I would like to sign him to another 3-year extension. Just kidding. No. Yeah, I'm kind of more so on the boat personally. I think with Kirk, there's a lot of pros and cons on my end. And I think on every Vikings fan's end, he brings a lot of good things. So he's consistent. He doesn't get hurt. For the most part, he's reliable. He's accurate. He pads the stats. But I just feel like at a certain point, it's you just kind of want a fresh face. Just like with a good head coach, you kind of want a fresh face. You want a young, exciting quarterback. I mean, he's 34, 35. So I don't know. Personally, I'm ready to let it ride, get something new. Unless, he has a great year, leads us to the NFC Championship, or does something miraculous this year, which you never know could happen based on the leap that he made last year under Kevin O'Connell. Obviously, they have a good bond. And it's obviously not the worst thing in the world to have a guy like Kirk. Like, a lot of teams would probably love to have a Kirk Cousins on their team. Mm-hmm. But I think with myself and probably a lot of other Vikings fans, like, I want to get a fresh face, a young potential quarterback. And I won't get too much into this right now, but I want Trey Lance personally. Like, okay. I really want him on the team. I think a lot of guys think he's a bust. But personally, I don't think he's done anything to prove that he's a bust. He hasn't went out there and played 8 full games and just, thrown tons of picks or played terribly. I think last year he earned the starting spot on the team. They were ready to trade Garoppolo. They looked like they were happy with Trey Lance as a starter. But he got hurt immediately, game 2. And then Purdy came in and kind of, stole the show. So I think he's right now would be, you could get him at his lowest point, like at a good bargain, unless he does something amazing this year. But I would like to get him on the team. He's 22 years old. I think he has a lot of upside. And again, I think he'd be that fresh face to potentially turn things around. And there's definitely a risk with it, but I'm open to taking that risk personally.
Okay. So in on Trey Lance. I'm definitely in on the idea of him. I don't know if I buy that he's ready to be a legitimate NFL player. I just have to see a lot more. And of course, you don't really know unless you try. So I completely understand why the Vikings could take a chance on him. I'm kind of out on the camp. I'd rather them, draft. I know Jaron Hall still is probably equal, if not a bigger long shot than Trey Lance is. Or if they wanted to take a chance on Anthony Richardson or Will Levis, I kind of would have preferred that route too. So yeah, I think letting it ride is probably the best move when it pertains back to Kirk. But their long-term plan is still kind of up in the air. Like, this could be, a year from now, if we're doing Vent Line, obviously still here, we could be talking about them drafting their future guy in the 1st or 2nd round. Steven, how about you? Are you kind of cool with letting Kirk Cousins ride here? Would you like to see an extension? How does that kind of sit with you?
Well, definitely not an extension. I would trade him, honestly. But I don't like Kirk Cousins is a good quarterback, right? I mean, I think everybody can agree with that. But we want to win a Super Bowl before we die, right? We don't want to get outclassed in the divisional round every year. So I think, look, we're obviously getting younger. I mean, like that seems to be the kind of the motivation of the front office right now. And, for Kirk Cousins to win a Super Bowl, you have to have a full team. You need to have the Philadelphia Eagles roster, right? So, can we build that in the next, 4 years while he's still a viable quarterback? Probably not. And so, just by getting an extension, we'll probably just stay in purgatory, and we're going to win, between 7 and 10 games, and we're going to get the 18th pick, and then we're going to have to, give away our future draft picks or future draft capital in order to move up in the draft to get a franchise quarterback. So, that wasn't, option C was trading him today, but, I do think you let him ride this year, you give him a chance. I think, the offense should be great. Hopefully Flores could fix it. You never know, right? This is a crazy league. but we're Vikings fans, right? So we understand that like there's not really lightning in a bottle that you can catch in that regard. So definitely not an extension. Let him ride out this year. Seems like a great dude. I mean, he seems like a really good guy. But I think if we're really trying to take the next step forward and advance, to the later rounds of the playoffs, we have to. It's probably not Trey Lance. Maybe it's probably not. It might not be a rookie, but we have to clean up the draft. We have to get somebody in that we're comfortable with. But the weapons are there and they're young, right? So there is some runway here. But I don't want a 40-year-old Kirk Cousins on the roster who we're paying $45 million to. So just where
your Eagles comparison is a good one, right? Like that's what they did with Jalen Hurts. They have built up that entire damn roster. I mean, Jesus, they had another killer of a draft, at least on paper they did last week, and they were on the doorstep of winning a Super Bowl last season. So can you find a rookie guy, whether that's Jaron Hall or whoever that is, build out the rest of the roster with elite playmakers and smart drafting and savvy trades for A.J. Brown, et cetera? I mean, I know Vikings fans aren't the biggest Eagles cheerleaders, and nor should they be. But I mean, they kind of laid out that blueprint. Now they're going to pay him. They're paying Jalen Hurts. They gave him a big contract. And, those cap hits aren't as daunting as other cap hits have been for highly paid quarterbacks. But yeah, what the Eagles did with Jalen Hurts building around him, what the Chiefs have done, obviously trading up for Pat Mahomes, that's also, maybe a more realistic solution too, where that's a good roster that was going to the playoffs and was flirting with 9-11 wins for a lot of years with Alex Smith. And then they trade up and get their guys. So, there's definitely a lot of blueprints. I think the Vikings or Kwesi or whoever wants to do it can copy or manipulate to make it their own. But I'm kind of with both you guys. I think you let it ride with Kirk, see where it takes you, whether that's classic Vikings and it's 9-8. Maybe it's another magic carpet ride where it's 13 wins and hopefully a deeper playoff run this time. I don't think the Vikings are obviously bad enough to be in a situation where they're just terrible, where they're picking in the top 10 barring injuries, right? Like if Kirk Cousins plays 17 games, and the Vikings only win 4 or 5 games, well, something else went like drastically wrong or everything that was bad luck went your way, which I feel like already happened to the Vikings a few years ago. So really interesting stuff from where the Vikings want to go with Kirk. Boys, offseason moves so far. What have been the favorite moves in the offseason? I know it hasn't been like fireworks and whatnot, handing out big contracts, but Ryan, what have you liked from the Vikings offseason so far?
Yeah, I mean, nothing's been extremely exciting. I like some of the pickups. The new cornerback, what was his name from Arizona?
Byron Murphy.
Yep. So I think he'll be good. Marcus Davenport. I mean, they have potential. At least Davenport has potential, but he seems to be injury prone. Obviously, number one favorite thing would be Aaron Rodgers leaving as well. Glad he's out of there. That wasn't a Vikings move. Obviously, we're going to benefit tremendously. So I'm going to be so happy to play the Packers and hopefully just stomp them without him. And then obviously I would say Brian Flores, like when you can get someone who is a, legitimate head coach to be your defensive coordinator after the defense has been trashed the last couple of years. And especially after how kind of boring it was last year, just nothing exciting going on, hardly any blitzes. Just the idea of him coming in, taking over and, mixing up the blitz packages and bringing some excitement to the defense. I think that's hands down, our best move, thus far, because I think that is one thing with Mike Zimmer, right? He kind of fizzled out his last couple of years, but you kind of take for granted watching guys do unique things on defense, watching blitzes, putting, Kendricks and Harrison Smith, up the, A gap. So I'm excited to get back to that, especially after last year. So I would say Brian Flores is probably the biggest thing on my end.
Yeah, it kind of feels like the highlight piece, at least so far, because they had such limited cap space and they just naturally weren't going to be big spenders, that hopefully Flores can come in here and kind of turn around this defense that's been struggling a lot over the last few years, even dating back to the end of Mike Zimmer. Steven, how about you? What did you really like about this offseason?
Well, I mean, I think the easy answer is like getting rid of Ed Donatel, right? But that's kind of the counter argument to the Flores. I thought, it was like, I think we're all hoping, and we've seen turnarounds in defenses, with just coaching and strategy. But that aside, just in terms of personnel, I think getting younger and thinking, more towards. I didn't like the move of pushing cap space into 2024, which they did a little bit. I thought we were well positioned to really have, it was like over $100 million in cap space next year. We've limited that a little bit, but I think just getting younger, getting faster, and then looking back at last year's draft and figuring out if any of these guys are players, it's important. So it doesn't really jive well with like keeping Kirk on the roster, but we can't keep pushing contracts into the future, and it makes it difficult. So getting younger, getting faster, and then opening up cap space, I think, is what the best thing that Kwesi's done this offseason.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think getting younger is important. I'm with you that I thought that they were kind of positioning themselves to be big spenders a year from now, and now you've kind of taken some of that piece of pie away to make things a little easier on you for 2023. So I would have liked to see them kind of keep as much money and at resources in the bank, if you will, to try to make a big splash in 2024. But that's all good too. I mean, the Vikings still have a pretty good roster, so there wasn't really expected of them to just completely leave it completely open and be bad again or be bad for the first time in 2023 before you try to get good again in 2024. So I get the thought process. I'm kind of with Ryan that I think Brian Flores is the thing that I like the most so far. Can he just scheme and tweak things a little bit differently here and make this defense look respectable again, which it hasn't looked in obviously years. So should be an exciting year, fellas. Boys, before we wrap up, do you have any final takes? Do you have any shout outs you want to give here on Vikings Vent Line?
No particular shout outs. No Vikings fans in my family. I just got to shout you out for letting me on. That's it.
Oh, Ryan, thank you, man. Appreciate it. Steven, how about you, dude?
I mean, I'd like to thank the Jersey Shore Fantasy Football League, because they make me feel they improve my self-esteem every year. But no, thank you. I appreciate what you guys do here, and we're looking forward to an interesting next couple months for the Vikes.
Absolutely, boys. Thank you for coming on Vikings Vent Line. Appreciate it. Some great takes here. If you want to get into, if you're watching this and you haven't been on Vikings Vent Line before, shoot me a note. It's vikingsventline@gmail.com. Would love to talk to as many Vikings fans as possible here. Well, this will air every Sunday throughout the offseason with yours truly on the Purple Daily YouTube channel. So we appreciate it. Hit that subscribe button. Daily Minnesota Vikings Entertainment back at full strength on Monday.